All right, hi everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Everyone doing okay so far? Okay. So, any questions first from last class? Any questions on Vanna White? Any questions on Wheel of Fortune? Anyone watch an episode of it? Maybe anyone? No. Okay. I want to talk a little about the exam first. Now people start paying attention. I want to talk about the exam, and I want to talk about the midterm. So as the syllabus has indicated since the first day of class, we have a midterm coming up on February 16th. That is not this Tuesday, but the Tuesday after. And the purpose of the midterm is to prepare you for the final. The reason, I think I mentioned this earlier, but the reason why I'm giving the midterm so early, this is class 10, not class 14, which is roughly halfway point, is because last year I found that no one bothered really preparing for the midterm. People didn't outline, they didn't get their stuff together on time. So my thinking this year, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, is to do it earlier where you have less material to know. And that way studying will be easier. Because in truth, for the midterm, my goal is not to test whether you remember rules for hunting foxes or whether you remember the rules for Vanna White or whatever else. My focus is on whether or not you are able to understand a fact pattern that's fairly complicated and figure out what I'm looking for. That's my goal. And if you have less stuff to remember, you'll have more time to think. And that's my sincere goal. So the midterm will be on the 16th. Okay, again, there's no class in the 11th, so you have a full week of basically no reading to study. So it'll help you even more so. The format for the midterm is the same as the format for exam, just half. The final exam is 3 hours, right? You have 2 questions, 2 essay questions. Okay. Let me download the midterm from last. I'm sorry, the final exam from last year, just so you can get a glimpse of what it looks like. The question itself, there will be 2 essay questions. Here, I have it up here. Okay. Everything is completely open book. You can bring whatever you want. It won't help you. It really won't. I say it every year. People don't believe me, but it's true. So the format's going to be like this. You're going to have 2 lengthy essay questions. There's no multiple choice, no short answers, all essay. I want to see how you can write. Each question that follows worth 50% of the final score. There'll be a lengthy fact pattern with instructions before it. At the end of the fact pattern, there'll be 5 specific questions asking to address specific aspects of the fact pattern. Each question is worth 50 points. There are 5 parts to it. You can do the math. Each of the subparts is worth 10 points. And I grade each on a scale of 1 to 10. The setup for each question is going to be you're either a law clerk for a judge, or you're an associate for a partner, or something to that effect. And you're going to be asked to write something analyzing the facts. These facts are going to be fairly complicated. We haven't done too much yet, which is why I like the early part. So in terms of what you've done before, there could be a question about hunting, right? There can be a question about, copying newspapers. There can be a question about whaling. Think of the things we've actually studied so far. It'll be a very complicated fact pattern. And then I will ask you 5 questions based on that, okay? What I'm looking for in terms of the Iraq, which are all drilled into your head, right? The issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. I'm looking for the A. I'm looking for the analysis. I already know the facts because I wrote the exam, okay? I don't need you to tell me what the issue is. I know what the issue is. I don't need you to restate it. And one of the ways that I force you to think on the analysis is that there's a word limit. Each question is a word limit of 1,000 words. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually is. Last year when I did this, every single student managed to write somewhere between 500 and 1,000 words. No one had much of a problem. I'll tell you though, the one attribute of who this actually hurts is people like me. When I was in law school, I could type 3,000 words in an hour and just dump everything I know on the paper. Hopefully something would be in the right ballpark. You can't do that here. You're actually required to think about what you're writing and give me something precise. There's actually a skill involved to that. And this is often frustrating to students who like to write a lot, hoping that they bump into the correct answer. You can't do that here. I'll take questions in a minute. But again, you have 1,000 words for each question. There are 2 questions, so a total of 2,000 words. It's not a problem in the end. People always grimace about it front, but everyone manages to do it just fine. The thought process of how to go about doing the exam, okay? The thought process of how to go about doing the exam is to read the instructions first. I know that sounds quaint. I know that sounds stupid, but always read the instructions first. Why? Because in the instructions, I tell you exactly what I'm looking for. I give you little hints about what I'm asking about. I'll take questions at the end. Keep your hands up. That's good. I'll give you hints at the outset of what I'm looking for. After you read through the instructions, my suggestion then is to go down and read for the 5 prompts or the 5 questions. Before you even read the fact pattern, you should read the instructions and you should read the 5 questions. Not the 4 questions, mashallah, right? The 5 questions that are posed. Then and only then should you start reading the fact pattern. You can do it if you want. This is how I recommend it, and you're always welcome to deviate. The fact pattern can be anywhere. This one, I guess, is about 2 pages long. This one is longer. I think it's like 3 pages long or 4 pages long. The fact patterns will vary in length and size. Take your time. If you're spending 30 minutes reading the fact pattern, that's okay. They're meant to be very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, and you're going to need to unpack it and digest what's actually being said. Before you actually come for the midterm on Tuesday the 16th, you're going to have a Langdell session. We haven't quite figured out who your Langdell scholar is, but that will be determined very soon. It's harder than you think to find someone willing to give up their Saturday mornings, but we will find someone shortly. But for your own independent study, I have on the syllabus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, it's actually double. About 2, 4, 6, 8, about 10 questions for you to consider. I have uploaded every exam I've ever given in this class. There's no mystery. There's no secret. These questions won't make much sense to you quite yet because you haven't learned everything. But before the midterm, I strongly encourage you to read through the old exams to get a sense of what I'm looking for. Okay. Now, in terms of preparation, again, I made a mistake last semester in assuming that students would actually start outlining at this early stage of the semester. Apparently not. But to the extent that those of you actually do want to start outlining, I recommend you start with the syllabus as the frame for your outline. I lay everything out in the exact order that I'm teaching it in, and that's a good way for you to think about it. If you'll notice, in class, we focus on specific things. If I'm focusing on something in class, that probably means it's important. But by no means do you ignore stuff that we don't cover. I can't cover everything in every case. There's simply not enough time. So again, the exam is open book. You can bring your outline, print whatever notes you want. They won't really help you. And the reason why they won't really help you is because the things I'm asking about are things you haven't seen before exactly. Where I'll take something that you've seen and I'll twist it and I'll spin it around. And to give you an example, I think I mentioned a week or 2 ago, I had a question a couple of years ago where someone was hunting an animal where they shot the animal on one property, it became mortally wounded on the second property, and then died on the third property that someone owned, right? There's no case you read that gives you the answer to that question exactly. There is no single one right answer to the questions I ask. And that's an important thing to remember. I'm interested in your thinking process. I'm interested to see how you apply the stuff we've learned. Say, well, there's this rule of capture that says you get the animal, you get it. Firing the bullet wasn't enough, but actually more eluding it was. But then when the animal trekked and fell to the third property, it's owned by the person who owns that property. There are different ways you can answer that question, all of which are correct. There's no one right answer. I also post the A+ exam, so you can see what one of your classmates from years past performed. But again, the mere fact that someone got an A+ doesn't mean their answer is perfect. In fact, as I'll show you later in the semester, the A+ papers are never perfect. No one's ever actually gotten 100 on my exam. It's not happened yet. One person I think got a 96 once. That was really high. But usually the high papers are at 92 or 93. So I've never actually had a perfect paper. So don't expect perfection. And you can look at past years to see how people performed. Now the midterm is going to be graded. Okay, I'm going to grade it, and I will do my damnedest to grade as quickly as possible. This is a very big section. You have about 80 of you here, and my other section for common law is also about 85, I think. So basically, I have 150 papers to grade in a short period, but I will do my most sincere effort to grade a few quickly. Another reason why I'm doing it early is it gives me more time to grade it and give it back to you with time to actually prepare for the semester. Last semester, I did it later, and I didn't get back to almost spring break, which is pushing when it's almost not meaningful enough. So here's the rub, though. It's graded in a limited sense. I will give you a grade A, B, C, D, whatever. Your final grade that you get at the end of the semester will only be impacted if you fail the exam. In other words, for my purposes, I'll give you a written score, but it's pass-fail. If you fail it, the consequence is that I bump your participation score down a third. What does that mean? If you're supposed to get a B+, you go to a B. Supposed to get a B, you go to a B-. This is my way of making sure you don't blow this off. This is my way of making sure you take it seriously. This is not a, this is not a serious penalty, but it's a penalty which is present to make sure that you don't not show up or you simply don't bother to study. More than anything else, this is for your own benefit. I can't tell you how many students ask, how do I prepare for your exam? How do I prepare for your exam? This, right? This is how you actually prepare for your exam, right? You actually take this seriously. You prepare your notes. You come in and you try and really do well. I'll make another point. The scores on the midterm, for the most part, become the scores in the finals. Very few people move from where they are at the midterm level. Some people go up. Some people actually go down, which is really sad. But it happens. People get complacent, I suppose. So what you score on the midterm is probably a fairly good forecast of what you'll get in the final. If you don't do well in the midterm, I encourage you to come meet with me. In fact, if you get, I think, a C- or lower, I will require that you come meet with me to try to figure out what you're doing. And whenever these meetings are usually very predictable, it's, so what do you do? Well, I didn't really study. Okay, well, there's your problem. Sometimes people say, I really study and not getting it. I can work with that, but you have to make forward an effort. If you come to me and say, I didn't study, I kind of just showed up, well, have a nice day. But I'm here to help you if you need it, or more, if you want it. I can't help you if you don't want it. Even last semester, a couple of people got C's and they never bothered coming to meet with me, even if I told them to. I'm not going to chase you down. I'm not going to drag you. It's for your own, benefit. Now, the actual process of taking the exam, I've assumed you've all used ExamSoft. Okay. I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to type. Strongly. The reason why is you're writing 2 lengthy essays. You put yourself at a disadvantage if you write it by hand. There's no other way to put it. You can't edit. You can't copy and paste. You can't delete, right? You can't type an outline, move stuff around, add and subtract. I mean, but every year about 5 or 6 people write by hand. I can't stop you. But if you have access to a computer, I'd strongly encourage you to type. The bar exam, you can type that. I don't know why anyone would ever handwrite the bar exam in the year 2016, but people still do. But it's your choice. You can do whatever you want. You'll be receiving an email from the registrar in the next, hopefully in the next couple of days, maybe the next week. If you don't get it by Monday, please email me so I can remind them. But in the next couple of days, you should be getting an email from the registrar informing you of how to download the ExamSoft. Also, this year, you'll get a special exam number. This is not your final exam number. This is your midterm exam number, as if it's more confusing for you. The reason why, this is actually for your benefit. I don't want to know what your final exam number is till the semester's over because I don't want to betray the blind grading. But if they give me a midterm number, once all my grades are submitted, I can say, okay, who's this number, who's this number? And that way I can reach out to students who aren't doing well. So you'll get a special midterm number You'll get you get the software to download the exam soft. If you have any questions, figure that out in advance with the registrar. Don't just show up the day of because they won't be able to help you. This is not like a final exam where you have a proctor. It's basically your Langdell person up here, and that person will necessarily know what to do. The other point. Let's see, anything else? Yeah, and if you decide to type it, if you decide not to type, you'll use a blue book and submit it, and I'll grade it just the same. But again, I strongly encourage you to, as you move along your law school career, find a way to use a computer. That's what you use to write most of your briefs, everything you ever do. If you want to write, go for it, but you're putting yourself at a disadvantage unnecessarily. But then again, last semester in my common law class, the A+ paper was handwritten, so it happens. But type. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now. I think your hand was up a couple minutes ago.
It's really. I'll just ask later. It's fine.
You sure?
Yeah.
No, ask now because you probably have the same question everyone else.
I just feel like so there's 1,000-word limit for each question.
Yeah.
And the sub questions. I mean, my natural inclination is to divide it up by 200
Yeah,
words each.
you can do that.
That's not. I guess that's not it's possible that some of the questions you're expecting shorter answers by a good amount.
I mean, you don't have to divide up equally, and the reason why I say it like this is you may not know each subpart as well. You may know a lot more about part 3 than part 2 because that's the topic you study better. Do as much as you can in 1,000 words. And I think your hand was up also.
No, that was what I was curious about. 1,000 divided.
You can divide it however you want. Total 1,000.
What kind of penalty do you usually do for someone that goes over?
I stop reading.
You stop reading.
Yep. I stop reading at word 1,000. Or actually 1,001. Yeah.
Can you bring outside materials to the midterm?
Whatever you want to bring. Won't help you. Yes, ma'am.
Will the midterm be the regular class period time from 9:30 to 11?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and again, your Langdell proctor, I don't know who that person is yet, but as soon as I know, I will tell you. Yes, sir.
How are we, if you're writing by hand, how do you do it?
You count. No, I mean, people do it every year. It actually takes surprisingly little time. You count the number of words per line, you write the total. It takes basically a minute to count the entire thing. I mean, it seems cumbersome, but it really isn't. So, yes. So if you want to meet with me to discuss questions, I'll do that. I find, frankly, that every student studies differently, and there's no one way of doing an outline, but I'd be happy to meet with anyone who wants to go over questions. But yeah, just reviewing an outline, I don't, you can outline however you want. It's a very personal process, and I've seen this over the years. People write outlines different ways. Some people need very detailed outlines that work for them. Some people need very general outlines that works for them. It's a really personal matter. Other questions on the midterm? And again, so the schedule today is what? Today's the 4th. So we'll have, today's the 4th. So we only have one more class of actual material before the midterm. That's on the 9th. Okay. And if you want to meet with me, you should probably start doing it sooner rather than later, because I'm actually not going to be here the day of your midterm. I'll be traveling, so I won't be able to meet you that day. So if you want to meet with me, email me sooner rather than later. I'd be happy to set up times to discuss with you. Yes, sir.
You're also not on campus the 11th?
I don't think so. No, I'm not here. So yeah, if you want to meet with me, email soon, and I'll be happy to set times. That's why I'm warning you 12 days in advance. I'll be around, but just not those 2 days. Other questions? Yeah.
Do you bring anything for the midterm?
Bring whatever you want. It won't help you. Yeah, I don't care. It won't help you. I mean, you can't cheat. You have to. It has to be printed out, right? People say, "Oh, can I bring my iPad?" No, you can't bring your iPad. No, people ask me that every year. You're not gonna bring your iPad, but if you want to print out whatever you want on paper, whatever horn book or whatever, it won't help you. The answer to my exam is not going to be in a book.
So you're saying we could bring our outline?
Yeah, bring whatever you want.
Old exam.
Bring whatever you want. It won't help you. I think I'm saying. Ask anyone who took my class last year. It will not help you. Each exam is original. It's a new question. I write a new exam every year deliberately because I know people save these things. I don't recycle questions. Yeah, it won't help you. Let me put it this way. You have 90 minutes. If you're taking the time to read through an outline or a book, you're going to have time. It won't help you. So do whatever you want. I don't care. I don't try and police. Like you have one page or one index card, whatever you want. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It won't help you. Just do whatever you want. I don't care. Just you can't talk to your neighbor. That's the only thing you can't do. You can't go to the bathroom and check with consult your neighbor. Don't do that. That's people do that. That's really stupid. But don't do that. Anything else? Going once. Going twice. Bundle of sticks. Okay. So today I want to introduce a concept that we've actually touched on in a number of aspects about what is property. I think I said in the first day, we begin the class by saying how to get property, right? And then only like 3 weeks into, we discuss what property actually is. And we've assumed, right? We've assumed that when you capture the fox is yours. We've assumed that when you create the newspaper article is yours. We've assumed that when you're Vanna White, you own your image and people can't copy, Wheel of Fortune, robot, whatever, right? But property isn't quite so solid. And what do I mean by that? So let's go back to the very first week of class. Remember the case of Johnson v. McIntosh? Okay, let's see. Where did I finish up last time? Okay, which one? You or you? Oh, you. Okay, that's Nancy. Nancy, so do you remember the issue in Johnson v. McIntosh? It was the idea that the Indians, they were not able to sell the land. Remember that was the holding of the case? But were they allowed to live on the land? So who owns the land? Oh, right, yeah. Who owns the land? The Indians can live there, but they can't sell it because they can't make contracts. So who owns the land? Oh, very good, right? The Indians had a right to occupy, but who actually had the right to sell it? Yeah, Americans, that's fine, yeah. So, is that Lola? So, I'll ask you the same question I asked Nancy. Who owns the land if one group can live on it and someone else can sell it? Who owns it? Why? What about the Indians? Don't they have something? So what do you mean they have the right to occupy? What does that mean? And what happens if some other group tried to come onto the Indians' land? Could the Indians kick them off? I'm asking, could the Indians, like some other group came along and tried to come to their lands, could the Indians kick them out? You guess not. What do you think? What do you think, Camille? Could the Indians exclude other people from their property? Why? It's okay. Go ahead, Camille. That's fine. Oh, right. So I think what we're getting at, right? So we have this right to use. We have this right to exclude, and we have this right to include. Okay, what do I mean by this? We already said the Indians have the right to use the land, right? They're allowed to stay in the land. They're allowed to farm there. They're allowed to hunt. Everyone agree with that, right? Do the Indians have the right to exclude people? In other words, do they have the right to keep people off their land? Probably not, right? Probably not. Do they have the right to include people? That is, do they have the right to invite people onto land?
Could they exclude another tribe? Like, let's say you have like a person who actually owns their American belong. The argument would probably be like, they can't. But what about another tribe where they can go, no, they're letting us use this land?
Well, let me ask you a question. Say the other tribe enters, and the Indians say, get off. And they say, we don't care, we're going to enter here anyway. What's the legal remedy?
You kill them.
You know that I said legal remedy. So, of course, in the state of nature, you can always have war. Could they go to a court and get an injunction to get them off for trespass? Probably not. Right.
I feel like, I don't know if the government made much of a distinction between the tribes, right? So they would say, so the tribes themselves are different, but I don't know if the government would care at the time.
Well, no, they certainly would have, because the treaty is between Tribe A and the settlers. Okay. So we have this right to use, we have this right to exclude, we have this right to include, right? We also have this right to transfer, right? And we already said that the Indians were not able to transfer the land. So again, I'll ask Samantha, who owns the land, the Americans or the Indians?
Government both if they
But do they own all of those attributes?
they gave the Indians right to use the land,
Uh-huh.
but then they also pretty much said the settlers were they could never be excluded, so they could pretty much.
Okay, so we have these like 4 attributes of ownership, right? These 4 attributes. You have, a right to use, a right to include, that is invite people. You have the right to exclude, keep people off. And you have the right to transfer or sell it. And what's interesting about the Johnson case, another reason why we did the first week, is that ownership is divided. The Indians have one right, and the Americans have the others. So when I ask you, who owns something, right? Who owns something? What I'm really asking you is 4 separate questions, right? I'm not just asking you who can use it. I'm asking you who can use it. Can you exclude people from it? Can you include people from it? And can you transfer it? These are different attributes of property law. And the image, right, the metaphor, if you will, used to describe this is the bundle of sticks. This idea that property is not some sort of solid block, but there are different parts to it. You have the right to exclude, you have the right to use, you have the right to transfer. And I'm sure many of you at this very moment have one stick in the bundle. So who here rents their apartment? Yeah, everyone, right? Is that Norma? Norma, do you rent where you live? Oh, you own. But have you ever rented an apartment before? Pretend you've rented an apartment before. Pretend you've rented an apartment before, okay? Pretend. When you rented it, were you allowed to use the place you live? Could you invite guests over? If someone, trespassed and, broke into your house, could you call the cops and evict them for trespassing? Could you sell your apartment that you're renting to someone else? You could sublease with whose permission? So even there, when you're renting an apartment, unlike Norma, everyone else rents an apartment, you only have you have a couple sticks in the bundle, right? You can use it, you can exclude it, you can include it, but you can't really transfer it. Maybe you have a limited right to sublease. We'll discuss subleases later this term. But you have a limited right. So, but would you say that you own the apartment? No, you say that you're maybe renting it or leasing it or something like that. That suggests that you have several of these sticks in the bundle. There's nothing wrong with that. I'll give you another example. There was actually a case I mentioned earlier involving Indians called Worcester versus Georgia. And the state of Georgia basically passed a law, if you can imagine this, saying that Indian reservations could not allow people onto their property. That only Indians were allowed to enter the property of the tribe. Why would they do this? Well, if we think of the second case we have today, the state wanted to prevent people from helping the Indians. They wanted to prevent doctors from entering the tribal area. They wanted to prevent lawyers from entering the tribal area to help the people. So the state of Georgia actually passed a law saying that the Indians can't allow people, they can't include people on their land. All right? Let's think of INS versus AP, right? This was the newspaper case we did last week. What were they seeking to do? Is that Amala? What was the Associated Press's beef? What was their problem that the INS was doing? What was the issue of that case? What was the entire basis of the case?
Wasn't it that
What do you think the newspapers were doing to each other?
Weren't they trying to figure out the ownership of the public?
Yeah. But what was INS doing that made AP so angry? Specifically. Is that Ryan?
Oh, they were using their property.
They were stealing it, right? They were basically copying their stories. So Ryan, in this bundle of rights, this bundle of sticks, which right was the Associated Press asserting?
Right to exclude.
Right to exclude. They were trying to exclude the other newspaper from copying their stuff. Is that Pierce?
Yes.
Pierce, let's think of the Vanna White case we did a couple days ago. What right was Vanna White asserting in this case of these four?
Right to use,
No, what right was she asserting?
right to exclude.
Exclude who?
Samsung for using her likeness.
Exactly. Vanna White was trying to exclude Samsung from using her image. If you're sensing a pattern, right, this right to exclude is considered the most essential or the most important aspect of property, right? Jared, is that Lauren?
Yes.
Lauren, why do you think the right to exclude is considered so pivotal, so essential in this bundle of sticks? Among all these other rights, why is the right to exclude so important?
Because if you can't prevent somebody from using or coming onto your property, you can't prevent them from doing it together.
Exactly. Think about it, right? If you can't prevent someone from trespassing on your property, how do you stop them from using it? If you can't prevent someone from trespassing your property, how can you decide who to invite, who not to? If you can't stop someone from trespassing, what stopped them from trying to sell it to someone else by claiming it's theirs? The most basic right in property, the most essential stick in the bundle, is the right to exclude.
I just, real quick, since we're talking about the bundle, I just want to make sure, is this like an exhaustive list?
Oh, no. This is good enough for now, but these are the four biggies. These are the four biggest sticks. It's not quite that big. The graphic's a little bit bigger than what we're talking about, but the four major rights is the right to use, right to include, right to exclude, and the right to alienate, the right to transfer. I'll put this in parentheses. You often see it's the right to alienate. Alienate means to transfer. Alienate actually means going from one to the other. That's what alien means. So alienate means to transfer. Okay. So Lauren was exactly right. This right to exclude is so important because you need to be able to keep people off your property. Is that Carlos?
Yeah.
Carlos, what happens to a piece of property if you can't exclude? What happens to a piece of property if you can't keep people off the land?
Anybody is going to go on it?
And what does that result in? What happens if anyone can go into a piece of property?
Well, you basically lose the ownership.
More specifically, what happens if anyone can access the same piece of land?
It's public land.
And then what happens if something's public land?
You can, if you want to make money off of it, you can.
What happened to the resources in the land, Sarah?
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Go for it.
they'll just take them.
Yeah, what do we call that?
The tragedy of the commons.
Exactly. Tragedy of the commons. Tragedy of the commons, right? If you can't exclude people, think of the buffalo, right? If anyone can come onto your land and hunt buffalo, they'll take as many as they can because there's no incentive to be frugal. There's no incentive to be economical. They'll just waste everything. So the right to exclude is the building block of private property because it prevents this tragedy of the commons. If you can't keep people off your land, well, then your land becomes worthless. Okay? And indeed, I'm sure you've all studied in torts, the trespass tort, right? I mean, why are we doing trespass here? Well, what are you trespassing onto? Property, right? And in order for a trespass tort to actually work, you first have to assert that you own something. I'm sure in your tort class, you never thought twice about, the person calling the police saying, this is my property, this person's trespassing. Well, there's often a dispute about who actually owns a piece of land. And moreover, whether they have the right to exclude. And the two cases we do today, they're awfully short. I'm sure you love the readings for today, right? It won't always be like this. the two cases for today illustrate two very different examples of how courts have understood this right to exclude. All right, so any questions in the basic bundle of sticks? We'll come back to this many times, but when you think of who owns something, what I want you to think about is not just one question, but who has the right to exclude, who has the right to transfer, etc. And to Cody's question, later in the semester, it won't just be who has these rights, but when they have these rights. I may own a piece of property during my life, and then when I die, she owns it. So to answer Cody's question in candor, it's not just a question of who has these rights, but when do they have these rights? And that's actually the most complicated aspect of the semester. It'll be after the midterm. All right, don't worry. I also deliberately did it earlier because the complicated stuff comes after the midterm, but this will be on it.
Could the right to transfer and the right to sell kind of be used interchangeably, or?
Yeah. And you could actually have the right to lease, but not the right to sell. You could have the right to transfer for a period of years, but not to transfer permanently. The question of when you can give somebody becomes very tricky. But for now, stick with these four. All right, so let's do the first case. Jacque versus Steenberg home, probably the shortest case you read all year, or close to it. Sarah, you want to please walk us through the facts of the Jacque case?
Sure. So there's a landowner,
Mm-hmm.
Jacque.
Good.
And poor things, they'd already had their land entrenched on, and so they were
Poor
very-
things. Oh man, you're already giving them.
I'm really on their side.
Well, we'll try and do it neutral. Try and do it objective.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, no, I appreciate that.
Before this case, previously,
Good.
some of their land had
Good.
there'd been the case doesn't go into detail. but
Real
there
short,
was-
yeah, real short.
But somehow the value of their land, or maybe a portion of the land, went down by $10,000 at least.
Okay, good.
And then there's the mobile home movers. There is a road to get to this other property where the mobile home needs to go, but I think it's got a really sharp turn. It would have been really difficult. And they asked the homeowner, may we go through your land, which was all covered with snow. And he said, no, well, we'll pay you. It's not a matter of money. It's just, no, you cannot come onto my land.
This land is your land. No, not like that. No.
They did it anyway. I
Good.
mean, through deep snow is huge. I can't imagine. There's probably ruts in the ground.
Yeah.
And they laugh about, like, the mobile home people, movers. They laugh about it, and they kind of block the road so nobody can see.
Good. Yeah.
And it's all really shady. So they go to court. The jury awards $1 in nominal damages, but $100,000 in punitive
Good.
damages. That judge sets aside the punitives.
Very good.
The Court of Appeals affirms, but then the highest court says, if you don't have the right to exclude, I mean, what do you have? I mean, the law has to enforce the law. I mean, anyway, so they got their $100,000.
Okay, very good, Sarah. I appreciate your effort to neutrally and dispassionately explain the facts. No, I mean, I love this class because the back-to-back juxtaposition of the first and second case really gives you pause. And I'll get to the other case in a minute. But you're exactly right. So you had a situation where you had a company trying to deliver one of these mobile homes. And you've seen these. These are huge, right? They basically make a flatbed tractor trailer. These are not these are not like small items. And they wanted to go from point A to point B. But the problem was there was like 7 feet of snow on the ground. And to actually go on the public road, they have to basically get these rollers. It'd be very complicated to go around this sharp turn. So they decided, the easiest path for us to deliver this mobile home is by going over the land of the Jacques. And as Sarah mentioned a moment ago, they basically went to the Jacques. They said, can we cross your land? We'll be quick. It'll take 1 day. No. Can we pay you some amount of money to cross the land? It'll be really quick. We'll get over it. And Jacques like, no, it's not about the money. It's about the principle. They had had some property issues before. They did not want to have these, people trespassing on their property. So what happens? They do it anyway. They basically block off the public road. They get one of these little bobcats, those little shovel thingies to plow the road, and then they drive over the property. It's not clear if the Jacques even were aware of it at the time, but they found out soon enough. And they called the sheriff's office. And the sheriff came by, and the Jacques said, "We want you to write a ticket for these guys." And they filed a complaint. And the police were a $30 ticket or something, right? And it turned out that the manager of the of the trailer company said, "I don't give a blank what he said. Just to get the home there any way you can." And he was giggling and laughing when it happened. And the Jacques said, "Follow the road. That's what the public road is used for." So one small note. I mean, you may not understand the difference in punitive and compensatory damages, but generally speaking, compensatory damages are only available, are always available for actual damages, right? And the actual damage of crossing over a field is basically nothing. So I think they gave $1 what's called nominal damages. Punitive damages, however, are usually not available in these sorts of cases. They have to be really, really egregious actions. In fact, in property law, much like in contract law, punitive damages are unheard of. You only get they call them punies for short, punitive damages in tort cases, which I'm sure you studied in your other classes. So the jury gave $1 nominal and $100,000 in punitive. Is that Carl? Carl, why do you think the jury in this case decided to award $100,000 in punitive damages? What do you think was going through their minds when they reached that number? Yeah, why do you think they didn't like him?
Most likely because the plaintiffs were people like them from the same community, and
Very good. Very good.
If they got to a certain right for people not to trespass, they want to be able to do it.
Exactly. Right. So punitive damages are about punishing the defendant, right? But they're also about sending a signal and sending a message. And I think Carl made a very astute point. This is a small town in Wisconsin, right? I'm guessing all the people who showed up for jury duty were farmers, or they had lots of land, right? This was in a remote area, and all of them thought, "Man, would I want some trailer driving across my grass?" No. And so they all said, "We need to send a message, and we need to say this is wrong. This is really terrible conduct, and we need to deter this from ever happening ever again." Okay, everyone with me so far. So then the court set aside the punitive damages. Is that Jose? You're not in the sheet. Okay, Jose. Why did they set aside the punitive damages? Was that your seat, or were you somewhere else before?
I added my name. I missed the first day of class.
Can you just come up afterwards and make sure you write your name here? Yeah. Thank you. So Jose, why do you think the judge set aside the punitive damage award?
Because in these cases, they don't award.
Exactly. The judge in the trial court said, this is not worthy. The action will not sustain the punitive damages. Okay? And the Court of Appeals affirmed, and they said, look, we don't give these punitive damages for a basic trespass case.
I had a question about that. If that is the normal common law, I know it's changed in this case. If that was the case, why was the jury even allowed to consider that type of thing?
Oh, what a good question. What a good question. So what do you think the jury instruction said? They were probably silent. So, and again, this is in my notes, so it's about a minute. But if I had to guess, the jury was not instructed on punitive damages. Jury instructions are very important, and law students don't even know what these things are. Before a jury is sent to deliberate, the judge reads a set of very specific instructions. And the purpose of the instructions are to make sure that they deliver a proper verdict. When you're in a trial court, one of the most important aspects of the trial is not the opening statement. It's not the closing statement. It's the instruction the judge gives to the jury. Because if the judge had given the instruction, you cannot find punitive damages, then there would be no issue. Very often, though, especially in state court, judges aren't always as diligent as they could be. They have many trials a day. This trial probably lasted a few hours, and the lawyers involved probably didn't have enough time to prepare the jury instructions. So I'm guessing the jury was not instructed at this point, and the judge said, whoops, so he took it away afterwards. And judge can set aside a jury's verdict if it's contrary to law, but in this case, the Supreme Court of the state would reverse in that point. So, but the question isn't so much about whether nominal damages or punitive damages are appropriate. I mean, that's interesting, right? But what I want to explain, Jeremy, is how did the court, the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, reach the conclusion that the conduct of the defendants was so terrible, that was so egregious? What did the Supreme Court of Wisconsin say?
They pretty much said that I guess because they asked the judge multiple times if they could enter onto the property, and they were refused multiple times. It's not as if like they didn't know. They clearly knew. They clearly, I guess, went around.
How did Jeremy? Let me ask you this follow-up question. You're exactly right. How did the court understand this right to exclude in terms of this bundle of sticks? How did it understand this right?
They pretty much said that I guess private landowners should feel confident, with the ownership of their land, and obviously not using deadly force, but being able to use the legal system to I guess, support private property ownership.
Good. So the court holds, right? They say the right to exclude others, and this is in a Supreme Court case called Kaiser Aetna. The right to exclude others is, quote, one of the most essential sticks in the bundle of rights. The right to exclude others is one of the most essential sticks in the bundle of rights. So this isn't like me making up some sort of stupid, bundle of sticks metaphor. Right? The Supreme Court has actually embraced this imagery. And they say, look, in Wisconsin, people have the right to use their property exclusively, so long as it doesn't invade the rights of others. This right goes away if the legal system does not protect it, right? If the legal system does not protect this right to exclude, then it means nothing. The Jacques had the right to exclude the mobile home company. And the nominal damages are insufficient to compensate for that. And then the court says, why are punitives appropriate? Society has an interest in punishing, deterring intentional trespass, right? This isn't just about compensating the owner of the property. It's about punishing and deterring trespassers, right? Cody, how does this judgment punish and deter future trespassers?
It lets them know that if you intentionally or willingly go on someone else's land against their will, you might be charged $100,000.
Yeah. So do you think the mobile home company here will ever trespass in someone's land ever again?
Probably not.
No, I'm guessing the value of this mobile home was a lot less than $100,000. I'm taking a guess here, right? So the interest here, the punitives, wasn't just to compensate for lost damage. That's not what the damages are. It was to punish and deter future lawless action. The court concludes that private landowners should be confident that trespassers will be punished, right? And then they mentioned self-help. Jonathan, what's this self-help business? You may remember this from the other courses.
Self-help.
Yeah, what's self-help? You know what that is?
What's a clue?
No. Anyone know what self-help is? Yeah. Oh, you're next. Perfect. Yeah, Serenity. What's self-help?
Just like fighting it off from each other.
Yeah. So, we're in Texas, right? Someone comes onto your land. I love those signs at Bucky saying, we don't call 911. There's a picture of a rifle. Serenity, what's self-help mean? What do you think? So how could the Jacques have handled this themselves short of calling the sheriff?
Maybe just fought.
Shoot them.
Yeah.
Slash your tires. I don't know. Cut their gas line. People who do crazy stuff. So what the court says is, if we allow the courts to intervene, and the courts have a strong protection for property rights, we don't need to resort to people shooting out tires and slashing gas lines. Okay? In that sense, the protection of private property promotes a orderly rule of law and not people taking the law into their own hands. We'll do a topic later this semester Or what happens if you're a landlord and your tenant doesn't pay rent? Well, perhaps in the olden days, what would you do? You change your locks and sell their stuff. For many years, that was the remedy. If a person was late on their rent, you change the locks and sell their stuff to cover the debt. As you imagine, that can be very confrontational if you walk home and you see someone trying to change your locks. People start fighting. So the courts and the legislature said we will create foreclosure, or I'm sorry, eviction proceedings, right? Where they'll have a what do you call it? A process where you file paperwork and go to court, and the sheriff has to change the locks. So it makes things less contentious. But if you don't protect private property and people aren't confident the sheriff will evict them, well, like the sign at Bucky says, they won't call 911, they'll just shoot. Right? Make sense? All right, so any questions in the case itself? Any questions in the case itself? Okay. So, Bianca, what do you think of the decision here? What do you think of the court's holding? That $100,000 are appropriate for driving a truck over a snowy field where there was no crops or anything even planted. I mean, maybe there were some ruts, but they will be cleared up pretty quick. What do you think of the court's holding here? You agree with it. Why do you agree with it? Okay. Lily, what do you think of the court's holding here?
Well, actually, I agree.
You agree? Okay.
Decision.
Why?
I have a thought. I kind of disagree with Sarah. Like, if you think about the truck company, the company that's trying to deliver the mobile home, and they tried very hard to get to where they want to be in a very efficient way, and they just couldn't, and because of this property rights, the right to exclude.
Right.
And I just think it's very inefficient. Like, this company wasn't. They made efforts to try to communicate, but they didn't get what they wanted, and
right.
they kind of like forced into this kind of action. So I just think this is a little bit unfair for the truck company.
So you agree with the decision, but you think it's unfair for the trucking company?
I just think it's a little bit too extreme. Like, just to blame the truck company for everything.
All right, Chris, what do you think?
That's a good point. I mean, it may be unfortunate defendants, but I think the overall bigger picture to protect our right to exclude people off our property is it will overcome the poor defendant.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I agree with this decision. I had a concern. How did they come up with 100,000?
Well, how do juries arrive at damages? When there's actual damages, you can calculate, okay, here's the cost of repairing the grass, and you can calculate something. Punitive damages, yeah.
I just want to remind everyone, like, it is possible to go down that other road. It wasn't impossible. It was just slightly different.
The question is, would it have cost more than $100,000 to go down the other road? Probably not.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, where my family is from, we've got land.
Where is this?
In Beaumont area. It's actually in Byron, actually out in the country. And there's a lot of timber land behind us, and people like to go hunting back there. And so it's not a matter of just one person crossing. It's like once people start going, everybody goes through. And so it's a matter of like you say once, and it's to everybody, and they can go around to the road. Instead of going through our land, maybe it's more direct, but it's still our land.
I think it's also like the trucking company or the mobile home company took the law into their own hands in a way.
They giggled and laughed and said, we're going to trespass.
Yeah, like they just said, well, we're going to do it anyway. And so that's really no better.
Okay. That's Hunter, yeah.
I'm reminded of the phrase, "A tree falls in the forest, and when you hear it doesn't make a sound." If these people cross the land, they're not aware that.
Well, they found out eventually when they called the sheriff.
They find out, but if they would cross the land, cause no damage, and they're not aware of it at the time, I don't really
really.
Oh, it caused damage. It screwed up some of their grass, made rut marks on the road. That's damage. Oh, there's damages.
I mean, I guess I'm not. I don't see where the real injury is. Besides,
If someone digs grass, is that an injury?
besides this abstract idea of trying to stop people from getting
Abstract idea.
Oh yeah, 'cause we change it. The government could do eminent domain and take their road and turn it into a public one.
But there's already a road, wasn't there?
But apparently it's sharp and curvy and gets covered up in snow.
Ah, that's normal. Yeah.
I just think that court, at the end of the day, they go back to the common law rule that property is sacred. And so, I mean, if you allow somebody to
Here, one tip forward, always speak forward. If you're ever in court, never talk to your co-counsel, always talk to the judge. This is actually a very gentle conversation, but if ever gets contentious, see one starts talking back and forth, go this way, not that way.
Thank you.
The easiest way to piss off a judge is to start talking across the other counsel, because then he loses control or she loses control. No, please. There's nothing honorific about this class. It's quite dishonorable. Yeah. Okay.
And try to keep that safe, the right to make sure that you own
Okay. All right. So let me see a show of hands. So how many people, after reading the first case, the Jacque case, thought it was correctly decided? Okay. How many thought it was not? Okay, go for it. Why do you think, Elizabeth, it was wrong?
I'm just on the Steenberg side. I mean, they asked, and I felt like they made it out so that we feel like the Steenbergs like have this terrible attitude. They were laughing about their horrible people. But when they asked the landowners, they said no, and they also the landowners said no. And there was no reason they should have said no. The other road seemed like a dangerous place to drive.
Elizabeth, let me ask you a question. Do people need a reason to allow them? I'm sorry, do people need a reason to say no? Is that be reasonable to reject someone entering your property? So I'm going to come back to you in a minute. I want to do the second case now, right? So I asked the first question. After you read the first case, right, who here thought it was correct? And virtually every hand went up, right? After the second case, did anyone change their mind about the first case? After you read the second case, did anyone change their mind about the first case?
I didn't, but I had a
Fine. I'll come back to you in a second. Did anyone actually change your mind after reading the second case? Oh, wow. Usually at least a couple people change their minds. Interesting. Okay. So the second case is meant, Sarah, what was your point?
I was just going to say, the homeowners in the first case were not infringing on any other inhabitants of their own land. And so the facts were truly different.
Okay. So let's do the second case. This is an interesting case, State v. Jacque. And unfortunately, the opinion published in your book doesn't do justice. So I'm going to give you, I'll give you some of the facts. So this wasn't some sort of random chance encounter where these aid workers stumbled onto this piece of property and they got arrested for helping these migrant workers. So this was actually an article from the New York Times the year. Now, let's see. Jaime, how do you think it was that a New York Times reporter and photographer were present at the very moment that they were getting arrested? How do you think that happened?
Someone probably made a call.
No, be more. You're sarcastic, Trip. Be more sarcastic, right? How do you think it was that a reporter from the New York Times and a photographer were in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey, at the time of their arrest? What do you think happened? It was a setup. What do you think when it was a setup? What were they trying to do?
It was the whole point was to get publicity that would be prevented from actually.
Yes, sir. Exactly right. Exactly right. This is what we call a test case. Anyone know what a test case is? You know what a test case is?
They just wanted to get arrested to see what the judge would decide on this.
Yes. They had a problem, right? They had a mission, and they were trying to help these migrant workers. Unsurprisingly, the people running these migrant camps weren't particularly interested in having these people onto their property. So it was known that these legal aid workers were not allowed onto property. Fine. So they wanted to get a legal remedy. The only way to get your butt into court is to get arrested. Okay? The only way to get your butt into court is to get arrested. You can't just abstractly walk into court and say, you know what, I think that that guy's being unfair. I don't like his policy. Have you been injured by it? No. Case dismissed. Once the decision was made to try and prosecute these guys for trespass, then they can raise a right to enter. They can say, wait a minute, no, this prosecution is void, and Your Honor, by the way, you need to declare this trespass statute unconstitutional. Yes, that's actually what they're trying to do. They were trying to say that this right to exclude stick, right, that the stick in the bundle, needs to be snapped in half, right? That there's an exception to the right to exclude in the event that there's some sort of extenuating circumstances we'll talk about here. Okay. So actually, the facts here, if you actually, I reproduced the article, you can read it later. But the facts here are this. So the defendants, these aid workers, entered onto this private property to try and assist the migrant farm workers living there. Tedesco, who was the owner of the farm, said to the reporter, quote, "I'll smash you for this. I'm going to get you for this. This is my property. You can't come in here looking around." So another farmer told the reporter, even President Nixon would not be allowed in. Okay? I'm reading from the article. It's not making this up. Another farmer said that the farmers would resort to violence to repel those trying to help the workers, likening it to the violence resulting from the civil rights movement. He said, this violence is going to snowball. According to the Times, he said, quote, "Either Hitler or Stalin would have known how to deal with these migratory farm workers in the camp he maintains." Okay? So the Times reports that the farmers were using the trespass law to keep the migrant workers isolated. They were not allowed to travel from camp to camp. All wages and living conditions were kept secret. This was a way to keep control. On the camp, the only flush toilet was a privy crawling with flies. 7 men slept in one room, and the beds had no sheets or mattresses. Jacque was at the camp to investigate a report that a 19-year-old worker had suffered a cut on his hand, and because of that, he couldn't earn wages. Harris went to the camp to pick up a 36-year-old migrant whose face was slashed and had to be returned to the hospital to have stitches removed. This was in the 1970s. It made about $9 a week. A family of 12 slept in one room with bed space for 8, and the camps didn't really have running water. So let's look at the facts here for a moment. I read this article because the book, again, doesn't go through any of the details. These were licensees. They were invited onto the property, right? When you invite someone onto your property, you can tell them where you can go. So imagine you have a farmer, right? And you say, okay, you 5 guys, you can stay in this part of the camp. You 5 guys, you stay in this part of the field. You 5 guys, you stay in that part of the field, right? What happens, Vivara, what happens if, farmer from lot A goes to lot B? What can the farmer do?
The farmer can come out.
Have him evicted for trespass, right? Think about that for a second. If you're only allowed to be in this part of the farm and you try and walk to a different part, you don't have permission to be there. You're trespassing. So effectively, the workers could either stay in their little, area, or they could leave. But if they tried to move around, they could be arrested for trespassing. And the New York Times reports that they used this trespass law as a way of controlling the people to keep in certain areas. And Varvara, the flip side to that is what happens if you had, one of these people was injured and they needed access to a doctor? Were there any doctors in the farm?
No, they were trapped in there.
Well, were they actually trapped?
I mean, they couldn't leave from one place to another.
Well, could they leave the property altogether?
I guess they could leave the property, but then they'd be fired.
And that's the rub, right? So physically, they were able to leave, right? They could not keep them chained to the actual farm. They could go and, hitch a ride to the town. I mean, these are remote farms, right? They could hitch a ride somewhere and get to a hospital. But practically speaking, once they leave, they're fired, and then they don't have anywhere to work. If aid workers tried to enter the farm, the sheriff would be called and say these people are trespassing, that they're not invited onto my property. Okay. So everyone understand here, the right to exclude, which every hand in the room supported 5 minutes ago, to say that the Jacques can exclude the motor company, is the same right to exclude to allow the farmer here to keep the aid workers off his property.
I think it's different.
Tell me why.
You have the right to your property until it hurts someone.
Oh, where do you get this from? It's right to your property until you hurt someone. Where do you get this from?
I remember the stuff you learned in class.
Lindsay, what does this mean? That you have the right to property until you hurt someone. What does this mean?
They say that property rights serve human values.
That's what the court says, right?
Yeah, that your title doesn't mean that you have dominion over people that are living, that you allow to live on your property.
Now, where do they get this from?
I think you mentioned in your video that it's from the 7th Amendment. No, I jumped ahead.
So I want to make a prefatory note about the decision. I put this gently. The mere fact that something's written in an opinion doesn't necessarily make it like correct. And this decision is by the New Jersey Supreme Court. And the New Jersey Supreme Court is reviled or praised, depending who you ask, for making social policy, particularly in the 1970s and the 1980s. The New Jersey Supreme Court, to give you an easy example, in New Jersey, education was funded by local communities. So if you had a rich community, there were lots of money for schools. If you had a poor community, there was no money for schools. And the New Jersey Supreme Court said that that was unconstitutional under the state constitution, and effectively said that the courts would supervise education statewide. The Jersey Supreme Court also said that a community has an affirmative duty to build affordable housing, and that they can't exclude people. None of this was in the statute. So the issue here, right, ostensibly was whether the trespass statute was unconstitutional. Why? There's no doubt that the aid workers trespassed, right? They were on the land without permission, black letter law. It was a trespass. So what the aid workers basically said was, this law is unconstitutional, right? You can't exclude us because someone's being injured. So the courts stopped short of actually invalidating the trespass statute. They're always very crafty like this. So instead what they said was, this isn't a case of trespass. Why? Because these aid workers have a right to be on the property. These aid workers have a right to be on the property. Okay, Jacqueline, why do these aid workers have a right to be on the property? What aspect of property law allows them to be there? By whom? They were not invited by the owner. The owner wants to throw them in jail. Now, I asked this question a few minutes ago. If you rent an apartment, right? You rent an apartment somewhere? Can you invite to your home whoever you wish? Do you know why you can do that? You never thought about it then. But you know why you can invite people to your property? Because your landlord lets you. I guarantee if you actually read your lease, I've never actually done. There'll be something in there that says you can invite people within certain reasons, right? You can invite people at certain hours. You can have a guest stay for a certain number of days, right? If you have someone who stays so many days, they have to pay rent. Right? Everyone has this? So your right to invite people is not absolute. You never thought about that, did you? If you want to have someone stay with you for a month, they got to start paying rent. If you ever had a dormitory, had a guest over the weekend, you have to, 3 days, whatever it is. Even if you're renting, your right to invite, your right to include is not absolute. So in this case, instead of having a modified right to include, the right to include anyone?
No.
Exactly. So under the setup on this farm, right? Under the setup on this farm, the workers had zero right to include. None. So really, this case was about the right to include and the right to exclude. The aid worker said, look, these people have the right to invite us onto their land. It's not really their land, but they have to invite us. And they can't exclude us. So the two work together, the include and the exclude. Okay?
I just wanted to make sure, because I thought that what the aid workers were specifically saying was, these people have a right to medical care, and I, as their lawyer, the other guy.
Medical care where?
I guess it didn't matter where they were.
No. See, this is the part the court skips over. I'm glad you raised that. No one was denying the fact that if they walked off the land to a hospital, they can get treatment. No one was denying the fact that if they walked 1 foot off the property, the lawyer could meet them. The issue here was that they, practically speaking, if they left the land, they'd be fired. So this wasn't about access to medical care or legal assistance. That's how the court framed it. That could be provided off the property. The question is whether you can provide it on someone else's land. That makes sense? So, Landon. So, how does the court go about ruling that this right to exclude is not so absolute, that this right to exclude can be modified? What did they say?
They did talk about, like we said, that one should not use his property as to not hinder the rights of others.
Yeah. So there's this Latin maxim, which is mentioned. I'm going to write it for you here. I always spell the wrong word. No, sic utere tua ut alienum non laetus. Sic utere tua ut alienum non laetus. I'm sure I butchered that. It effectively means use what is yours so as not to harm others. Use your property in a way not to harm others. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't that sort of like the duck hunting case?
Good.
Where he shot the shotgun you could do that on his property as long as it wasn't injuring.
Good, yeah. Yeah?
I don't understand how there is just an immediate, like a court defense against the trespassing charge for private necessity. If they run one medical, like I understand the medical.
Can't they?
And not being able to leave.
Why can't they leave? Is it really necessary?
No, I mean I'm not talking about them having to leave, but if they need medical attention where they are, why can't you just call that private necessity?
Because it's not necessary. They can leave. An ambulance will be waiting at the foot of the property to take them away.
I do have one more question about their ability to leave. We know if because we studied, so like, what if they didn't know, right? Like a lot of people, especially like migrant workers, don't know what their legal rights are. So
Okay. I'm gonna get there in a minute. Okay. So I want to focus on this Latin thing first. So there's this common law idea: use your own property so as not to injure others, right? And then the example she gave with the duck hunting is a good one, right? You can do whatever you want, but if you're blasting your gun during duck hunting season, you're actually interfering with anyone else. So under the common law, Graham, under the common law, was the usage here, excluding the workers, was that harming others?
Well, I think it talks about how you can't put the land before these the rights of these.
I'm talking common law. I'm not New Jersey yet, right? Under the common law, was the use of the land harming others? Give me a common law answer, not a modern answer. So I'm going to get to the modern answer in a minute. But under the common law, this use of the right to exclude was not harming anyone. These people were invited to the land for a specific purpose. If they chose not to do that, they could leave and get medical care elsewhere. Right? The New Jersey Supreme Court, as they often do, ignores the common law. And I'll give you a hint, right? Throughout the course of the semester, if you ever have a case from New Jersey or California, the answer is they are disregarding the common law rule. I swear it'll hold every single time. And this works for other classes too. If there's a case from New Jersey or California, they're about to get rid of a common law rule. Why? Because it's not fair. That's the answer. I don't care. Trust me, and in Prop 2 more so, but that's your answer. So, Cameron, why in this case does the New Jersey Supreme Court abandon the common law rule? Just gave you the answer. Yes. So why? Thank you. Learned, right? Why is this rule not fair? Very good. Very good. Right? So the short answer is, right, the court says this is a very vulnerable segment of society, a highly disadvantaged segment of society. You have these farm workers who come, they're usually not educated, they don't really have a community, they're migratory, they don't have any base, they're rootless and isolated, the court says, they're unorganized. They have no economic power. So the court says these are people who really are needing help. And the only practical way, the only meaningful way of allowing these people access to help is to send people onto the camps. They do not have the capability, financially at least, to leave the work camp. Right? The court says it's unthinkable that a farmer can use this right to exclude to isolate the workers in conflict with their well-being. So whereas traditionally common law property rules focus on usage of property and not people, in the modern sense, at least in New Jersey, people come before property. Now, law students love this decision. Like, oh man, that's awesome, that's awesome. And then I pour some cold water and say, this is not anything close to majority rule. Okay. Again, the Jersey Supreme Court was very much in a league of its own, and for the most part, if someone's trespassing, you can shoot them. I don't say that lightly, but in a significant number of states, you can call the sheriff or you can shoot them. You're not required to let anyone into your property. So this is not a majority rule in any sense. This is an outlier. But I think it does serve a purpose of illustrating how alternate usages of property and alternate ways of looking at the bundle of sticks can work. I mean, the court says, look, the farmer can keep pursuing his farming activities, without denying aid to these workers. The court also says that members of the press can't be denied access to the property. Why the heck is that in there, right? What, Natalie? Why is the court so interested in that members of the press, right? Members of the press can enter the property. Why do you think? Yeah, this is a journalism opinion, right? They want to make sure that there are cameras that can highlight the plight of these people. So to the point raised before, even if we can assume that the only way they can get necessary medical care is to allow these people onto the land, is it necessary to have reporters for their public safety? No. Does it help make a big stink? Yes. So again, this opinion is rogue in many, many senses, but it does illustrate a different perspective of how the right to exclude exists, right? So we have these two opinions. Oh, Elizabeth, perfect, right? We have these two opinions. We have the Jacque case, and we have the Shack case, right? How do you reconcile these two opinions? How do you find a way to match these up? What do you think the rule to learn from this is? Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a good way of synthesizing it, right? At least for the New Jersey court as well, when you start using your land to injure individual people who are invited in your land, the courts diminish your bundle of sticks, right? The court diminishes your bundle of sticks. This comes up a lot. So I'll give you a recent example. Animal rights activists often try to gain employment at meat processing facilities, and they bring in hidden cameras. And the purpose of this is they're not interested in earning a paycheck, but they're trying to take video of the manner in which animals are slaughtered. They put on PETA websites and all this other stuff to make a big fuss about animal rights. So some states have actually enacted laws that prohibit, and make it a crime to film in a slaughterhouse. They're excluding any sort of reporters from a slaughterhouse. And very often undercover journalism involves, sneaking onto a place and taking pictures, right? So this sort of thing goes on where people try to exclude and use this right to exclude to keep a light from shining on behavior that others may not appreciate. All right. Any questions on the Jacque case? Yes, sir.
Didn't they mention that they didn't want to prosecute this case?
Oh, so good. I'm glad you mentioned that.
I was.
Why? Okay, I didn't. I may have mentioned this last year. For those who watch your video, I'll do it now. Who are the parties in this case? Is that Carlos? Yeah, Carlos. Who are the parties in this case?
The
What's
aid
it?
workers and
No. What's the name of the case? What's the title of the case? So whose state?
the state. Oh, yeah.
It's a criminal case. Okay. So the only reason why this case was brought in the first instance was because the farm owner demanded that they file a complaint, right? But as the case was up on appeal, did the prosecutor want to continue the case? No. So this is a question for anyone. What happens to a court case when no one is prosecuting it anymore? It gets dismissed. When a prosecutor decides not to continue pushing a case, the case goes away. When there's no adversarial nature, when there's no adversaries in the case, there's no actual case or controversy. So is that Christine? Christine, tell me please, why did the New Jersey Supreme Court resolve a case where the parties agreed the case should be dismissed? Why would they write this lengthy opinion they made you read in property class if there was no actual controversy? Exactly. When I say that the New Jersey Supreme Court was very good at making social policy, this is an example. There's no actual case or controversy anymore. There's no case. The prosecutor wants to dismiss the charges against Jacque. Once the charges are dismissed, the case is over. So what do? The court reached out and resolved it anyway. There was no dispute to resolve. There was no actual dispute. And you can say whatever you will about their empathy. For matter of procedure, this aspect of the case was quite egregious. There was no actual case at all. Any questions on this? Anything else? All right. If you have questions after class, you can come talk to me or email me, but sooner rather than later. And I will see you all on Tuesday. Thank you so much.